Okay, picking up where we left off. We're looking at regulation, and this one is about cable and DBS, which is direct broadcast satellite. Okay, this is a whole new phenomenon because here's the problem. The FCC was designed to protect citizens, and the way they were doing that was that everything that goes through the air, the government has a responsibility because the government basically owns the air. Well, the government doesn't own it. All of the people own it, but the government runs it. So what that means is they were at a confused state, let's say, when cable was introduced. Because the cable companies said, hey, we're not in the air. So we can put whatever we want on there. You can't let our content and our structure and all that kind of stuff. But the FCC says, yeah, we can. Now, the FCC, I should point out, is a committee of 5 people. Typically, always this action, there's an exception, I think, right now as we speak, but generally there are 2 people that are Republicans, 2 people who are Democrats, and then the chairman is the same party as the president, and the president names the chairman. But right now I think we actually have 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat. I think that's how it works. Usually it's 2 and 2 plus 1, but I think right now it's 4, 1 and 1. Anyway, the cable companies. First act that makes a difference is the Cable Communications Act of 1984. What happened was this. By 1980, more people were using cable than they were using broadcast. So, cable got kind of big for its britches. It started gouging the people, charging too much. Well, Ronald Reagan was president at the time, and he believed in deregulation. So they deregulated it, and the cable companies could charge whatever they wanted to charge. Of course, what happened was they were charging sometimes too much, and upsetting some people, okay? And so what happened is you had an act in 1992, Cable Television Consumer Protection and Competition Act. So any place where there was not competition, the local franchising entity could regulate how much the cable company could charge. If there was competition there, they couldn't. In other words, if you had 2 cable companies in town, you couldn't regulate it. But if you only had 1, you could regulate it and keep the prices down so it wouldn't be so expensive for the consumers. The other thing that they introduced was the idea of broadcasting local stations called must carry. Up until this point, the cable companies did not have to carry the local stations. And the local stations didn't like that, of course, because people were watching cable TV and weren't going to be able to watch the local channel. So the cable company and the local TV station has to negotiate, and they still do have to negotiate a settlement. Now, the difference is the cable company has to, at some point, carry it. So they must carry. That was the must carry law. Okay. So, 1999, the Satellite Home Viewers Improvement Act, same thing. Up until this point, satellite wasn't carrying the local. They had to start carrying the local. That was the improvement, as well as the improvement in the technology. And so you could actually, it was actually a much better reception. Originally, the DBS, if you had bad weather, you got bad reception. It was so they had to improve that, and they had to make it, on demand possible and that kind of thing. So but they caught up in 1999, and they created competition for cable companies. So the DBS must carry the local stations. Okay, the internet, again, controversy. Who has control or who can regulate the internet? FCC thought they could. Well, the too many court cases determined no, they couldn't. The 1996 telecommunication did put a limit I'm sorry, off the limit of ownership. Up until that point, you could only own so many stations, something like 5 TV stations, 7 radio stations. Now you could own as many as you wanted. So we had companies like Cass come along. We have companies that have 500 stations, have 1,200 stations. So you could have a lot of stations now. The idea was to create competition for the consumer. Now, this was also in the telephone industry. They were great competition. This is about the time that cell phones were just coming out in the U.S. They'd been around in Europe for a few years. We were a little bit behind the curve on that. So this was another matter of deregulation. 1996 was deregulation. Interestingly, because even though we had a Democrat in power, Bill Clinton, usually Democrats are in favor of regulations because they want to protect the consumer, they feel. But that wasn't the case at this point. What's important is this. The internet was determined to be an information service, sort of like a newspaper, more so than TV station. So, being an information service, there's really no real regulation on it, not from the 1996 Telecommunication Act. Interesting. Now, how about the internet and the First Amendment? Well, the courts consider the internet's First Amendment protection more similar to the press than to broadcasting or telecommunications. So the internet has been protected by the First Amendment for most of its life. This didn't become an issue until 1995 when we made the internet commercial. Then you had to have more regulation. Okay? So as long as it's considered an information service, they're not regulated. Now, the digital age, internet and mobile technology. Okay. First concept I'm going to talk about here is net neutrality. Should all internet traffic be equal, or should there be preferential treatment for certain services? This is a hot item. And what happens here, typically in our country, when the Republicans are in power, they are against net neutrality. In other words, they want providers to be able to charge different amounts if they feel like they should, based on how much traffic a particular user is using. So, for example, if I'm a hardcore user and I'm on the internet all the time and I download stuff and I upload stuff and I'm watching movies and I'm really into it, and you have an internet connection that you use 2 or 3 times a week, do a little email. Right now, we're charged the same. Well, under net neutrality, we're charged the same. But people think, well, they should charge me more since I'm using more bandwidth. The problem with it becomes that if you start just making kind of distinctions, it becomes very political. And so they'll say, oh, well, we're not going to allow, we have this belief, as much space, much time, as much bandwidth as another group that agrees with me. And that's the problem. So the Democrats are in favor of net neutrality, and the Republicans, generally speaking, are against it. Another one of the issues is cybersecurity. Ransomware, where they say someone take over your system and charge you a ransom to pay in order to get the anecdote, basically, in order to release your system. This is a big problem. Phishing, of course, is when the people are trying to get information from you that you don't want to give up by faking who they are. Get your social security number is the main thing, bank account numbers, those kind of things. Now, because these things were happening, ransomware, phishing, that's just 2 examples of fraud, this prompted the governments to establish frameworks for national and corporate security. So we have frameworks for, actually states have frameworks in some cases, as well as the federal government, to try to protect people from cybersecurity. AI has been a big help because because it goes so much faster than a human being. The way AI works, as we talk about at some point, is in patterns. And so the way cybersecurity works is when there's a pattern is detected. That's what they say. Like if suddenly somebody in Brazil is using your credit card, and you've never been to Brazil and you've never used it in Brazil to buy anything, that's a flag. And there's something wrong. And so cybersecurity, AI will pick up on that. So that's one of the really good uses of AI because it's a real simple use because it's patterned. Another digital age phenomenon is the global connectivity. So the efforts to expand internet access worldwide, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, emphasize the importance of connectivity for economic and social progress. The more people can have this, the more you can do online. If they don't have access, they can't. This is part of the neutrality argument as well. So we have global connectivity. It's basically a good thing. And we want to protect it so that all people can be online and be connected for economic and social reasons. Okay, so what are the most recent issues? Laws. Regulations like the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the GDPR, this is in Europe, set global standards for data privacy, influencing laws in other regions, including in California, Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA. These laws provide you with greater control over their personal data. You can opt in, opt out. You can determine what of your data is going to be on a website. Cyber threat framework. Governments established cyber resilience plans and encourage public and private partnerships to defend against evolving threats. Okay, so the government creating these plans in an attempt to protect the privacy of individuals. The problem is somebody goes on Facebook and they tell everybody where they live and how old they are and when they were born, and you're mostly giving your information away without realizing it. And that information becomes valuable, very valuable to the people collecting it. So you need to be aware of what you're doing. And finally, misinformation is another issue. Fake news and harmful content online had led to content moderation policies and the use of AI tools to detect and mitigate false information. Again, this is the use of AI, not perfected yet. And so as they move along in developing AI tools, one of the areas they work on is in misinformation. Being able to recognize it and to let whoever needs to know about it. The real tricky thing here is with this news, I won't put anything I want online. I can blog and I can just tell all kinds of lies. I have a right to do that as long as I don't hurt anybody. As long as I'm not doing hate speech. Okay? It's my freedom of speech. And those are things that are closely protected. Okay, I'm going to stop here we're going to end the second part. I have one more part to do on regulation.